Okay, ladies, let's introduce the endocrine system. Okay. So first, I'm going to start off with a little picture here. So the endocrine system is, so we just looked at thermal regulation and we looked at osmolar regulation, right? Give me an example of an organ involved in osmolar regulation. What's an organ involved in regulating water and solute in your body? What's that? We didn't say the liver. Yeah. So the kidneys, right? What would be another organ involved in, how about thermal regulation? The brain. Now, is the brain involved in both? Thermal, yeah, it is. Give me an example of how it's involved in both. Right, so it's involved in detecting temperature. It's also involved in detecting whether or not you're dehydrated, right? When you're dehydrated, what's the name of the hormone that gets released? ACTH. Very good. Okay. So now we're going to continue with the endocrine system, and you'll notice that some of the parts are the same. Now, we also talked about a hormone when we looked at osmolar regulation. What's the name of the hormone that comes from the adrenal glands that increases salt reabsorption? So that's an A also. Almost sounds like testosterone, but it's not. It's aldosterone. Very good. So here are the adrenal glands. So the endocrine system will have similar parts, okay? So here are some of the parts of the endocrine system. You got the brain, okay, the thyroid gland, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the reproductive system. We're going to talk about how these systems work together, okay? Now, what you'll see is that these systems are going to work through the use of hormones. What's a hormone? Charlotte, in your own words, what do you think a hormone is? What's that? It's a chemical what? Yeah, very good. It's a chemical message. Okay, so we're going to talk about how the endocrine system works. Basic idea that you'll see here is that one organ or gland will talk to another one through the use of a hormone which travels through its bloodstream. That's the basic idea, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, and we'll talk a little bit about other ways of communication, but that's what we're going to focus on. Hormones traveling through your bloodstream, okay, and how they work. So here's the endocrine system. This is what it's involved in. Okay, it's involved in growth, involved in your metabolism, it's involved in reproduction. We will talk about the reproductive system a little bit. Okay. Now, this is a ductless system. What does that mean? A ductless system. What's a duct? A duct is like a tube. So you guys studied the digestive system in grade 11? Okay. You know how what is it? I want to think about here. The bladder, the gallbladder, dumps bile into the small intestine. I don't know if you remember that. But that's through a direct connection. So a duct is like a direct connection between one thing and another thing. A ductless system is no direct connection. So we're talking about like things diffusing through blood or diffusing from one cell to another cell. And that's how we're going to talk about how that works, okay? Now, an endocrine system is different than the exocrine. Exocrine means, like, exo means outside. So the exocrine system are things that you can sweat out, for instance, all right? So, like, for example, when animals go around, like, we don't really, well, actually we do this, but not maybe conscientiously, maybe more subconsciously. Like, we don't go around smelling each other's parts. You ever see dogs do that? And I think it's very disturbing. They go around, they smell each other's rear ends. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, we don't really do it. But here's the thing. Do you think subconsciously we do? Do you think that we pick up external signals from other people? Yeah, because the perfume industry is trying to mimic that, right? So the exocrine system are things that we like. Chemicals that come out of the body. So you'll see this later on. I'm going to show you this really neat video when we get to the section on ecology, where this wasp secretes this chemical and confuses all of these ants. Okay, so things that we secrete out of the body, that's through the exocrine system. We're going to focus on internal messages. There was an experiment. I will point this out though. We're not very good. Remember, our sense of smell is not very good, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a sense of smell. So there was an experiment done where they gave women, I think women that were ovulating. You know what that means, right? Okay. And they gave them sweaty t-shirts. And they gave them sweaty t-shirts from people that were related to them and people that were not related to them. Turns out that the women preferred sweaty t-shirts from people that were not related to them. So it suggests that we can detect these signals that come out of the body. We're not as bad as we think in terms of detecting these types of smells. But that's not what we're going to focus on. Okay, we're going to focus on internal signals, things like insulin. Okay, that's what we're going to look at. So here are some of the ways chemicals can be transported from one part to another. This is what we're going to focus on. We're going to focus on this mechanism. A cell makes a hormone. The hormone travels into the bloodstream, circulates around the body, and then hits a target cell. Okay. You'll see in the nervous system, we'll talk about how the nervous system works, but the nervous system and the endocrine system work very close together. Okay, very, very close together. So a hormone is a chemical message. A neurohormone is basically the same chemical message, but it's coming from your nervous system. But you see the same thing, right? Goes into the bloodstream, target something. So what would be an example of a neurohormone that you saw yesterday? A hormone that comes from the brain that targets the kidneys. ADH would be an example of a neurohormone. Okay? Whereas insulin would be a hormone because insulin does not come from the nervous system. It comes from the pancreas. Okay. So we are going to study hormones, but there are a hormone is just an example of a chemical message. So a pheromone is a chemical that actually is released externally. So that would be an example of something that is here with the exocrine system, something that you could sweat out, right? So we are going to focus on not things like pheromones, things that we could secrete out of the body. Okay, we're going to focus on things that are internal, like neurohormones. Okay? We are going to focus on things that travel long distances in your body. So think about ADH, right? Where does ADH come from? The brain. Where does it end up? Kidneys. Okay, that's a pretty long distance for a chemical to travel. A chemical that is, sorry, where am I here? Okay, so here are just different categories of chemicals. Okay, neurotransmitters, we'll study those in detail in the next chapter. These are chemicals that travel between neurons. And we'll talk about how they work, okay? But that's the next chapter. Hormones are what we'll focus on. We won't talk too much about local regulators, but local regulators are things that act locally. So things that do not have to travel very far. Okay? So here are some examples of local regulators. Histamine. You ever heard of that? What's histamine? You ever take an antihistamine? Why would you take an antihistamine? Because you have what? An allergic reaction. So we'll talk about histamine when we get to the immune system. Okay? So here are some examples of local regulators. So these are chemicals that do not travel very far. They act, so where they're being made, they act in the same region. Okay? Whereas a hormone could be made in one part of the body and travel very, very far distance. That's what we're going to focus on. Okay. Here's the thing about hormones, okay? They're chemical messages, just like local regulators, just like pheromones, just like neurotransmitters, okay? And they're made, so how they're made actually is going to determine how they're going to work. Now, I'm going to make it simple, okay? I'm going to basically say, because here, presentation divides hormones into 4 types. We're just going to say 2 types, okay? So there are the fatty acid derivatives that look like this. And then there's steroid hormones that look like this. So basically we'll keep it simple. These are the lipid hormones. Okay? The hormones made from fat. Remember your biochemistry, right? Steroids and fatty acid chains, we group them together as lipids. Then we have the other types of hormones. The amino acid derivatives. Here are some examples. Epinephrine is the same as adrenaline. Okay. And here's their structure. Okay. So there is some examples. We'll talk about the thyroid hormones later on, not today. And then we have the larger protein hormones. And here are some examples. So like ADH that we talked about with osmoregulation, insulin, okay? These are examples of protein hormones. We already looked at oxytocin. Okay. By the way, ADH, should mention this to you. What's the other name of ADH? It has another name. We studied it in genetics. It starts with a V. No, not vasotocin. Vasotocin is the ancestor. Vasopressin. Yeah, forgot to mention that to you guys. So ADH is the same as vasopressin. So 2 types of hormones. Okay, they're the hormones made from fat, and they're either going to look like steroids, so they're going to have this structure, or they're going to have this structure, or hormones made from amino acids, and they're going to look like this, or larger, look like this. So 2 types of hormones, okay? Fat-based and protein-based. So here's a question. A hormone is a message, right? So ADH is made where again? Where does it go? It goes into the bloodstream, and then it travels around the body, and it targets the kidneys. My question is, why don't other parts respond? Why only the kidneys? Why don't your eyes respond? Or your heart? Because think about this. When something goes in circulation, where does it go? It goes everywhere. So why doesn't your heart respond? Why your kidneys? What's that? Very good. They don't have a receptor for it. So here's the thing. When a hormone is released, the only cells that are going to respond are the ones that have matching receptors. I want you to think of the receptors like the ears of the cell. Okay? So if a chemical message is spoken and you don't have the ears, will you hear the message? No. So the only ones that have the ears for that message are the ones that are going to respond. My next question is, do they all respond the same way? Take a look at this picture. What do you think? Naika, what are you seeing here? Perfect. Yeah. Very good. So a chemical message, in this case, the message is epinephrine, which is adrenaline. Okay? That's one of the things that will be frustrating for you guys is that a lot of these chemicals have multiple names. Okay, so you just got to remember which ones are the same. We know what adrenaline is, right? We've heard of it. We know that it gives you more energy or less energy. Gives you more energy, right? So, does every cell respond to adrenaline? The answer is no. Only the ones that have receptors, okay? But does every cell respond the same way? And the answer is no. Because you can see in this picture that this blood vessel has a receptor, so it will respond to adrenaline, but when it responds, it constricts. This one dilates. Why? So far, we've learned two things. Not all cells will respond, and the second thing we learned is not all cells will respond the same way. But in this case, why? There's got to be a reason. Why do some blood vessels constrict, and why do some blood vessels dilate? Now, we'll talk more about this, because we're going to talk about the stress response. Because it seems today that everyone has anxiety and stress. So we're going to talk about the stress response, right? And you guys will be graduating in about a month and a half. So maybe this is an appropriate conversation. Right? You guys stressed? Charlotte says she wants to learn something today. Okay? When you're stressed, you have, now, by the way, the word stress, doesn't mean like you have to worry about something. Stress could be good, right? The stressful situation could be Emily's playing a soccer game, right? That could be the stressful situation. Or stressful situation could be, it could be scary. You're walking down the street and there's a very big, scary dog that wants to eat you. What happens in a stressful situation? What does your heart rate do? It goes up. What does your blood pressure do? It goes up. Why? Why does your heart rate go up? Why does your blood pressure go up? What about your sugar levels? Do sugar levels go up or down when you're stressed? Go up. Because the sugar is fuel, and you want to move more fuel around the body, because in a stressful situation, there is what's called the fight or flight response. You ever heard of that? Either you're gonna deal with that stress and fight it out, or you're gonna run away. Now, if you're gonna, in either case, you need what? Energy, right? If you're gonna fight, so if Emily is in a soccer game and she's fighting someone for the ball, she's gonna need the energy, right? So, here's the thing. What does it have to do with this picture? Is this guy going off track here? So, we know that if you fight, you need more energy, right? Now, more energy, we know how energy is made. We know that energy is made through cellular respiration. We know we need oxygen and we need nutrients. So, what body parts are going to need more oxygen and more nutrients when you're fighting? Think about soccer. You're playing soccer, right? So, where would you have to deliver more oxygen and nutrients to? What part of your body? Very good. Your legs. Even your brain. Because you want to think, right? You want to think clearly. But here's the thing. Does every body part require more oxygen and nutrients? No. You only have so much blood. So it's simple math. If some parts need more, that means other parts are going to have to get what? Less. And that's what's happening in this picture. Some parts will get less blood, and that's why the vessels will constrict. Some parts will get more blood, and that's why the vessels will dilate. But we will come back to the stress response later on. Okay. Here's another example of not all cells will respond the same way. Insulin. Why does insulin get released? What's the trigger for insulin release? What's the trigger for insulin release? It's when you eat something what? Sweet. Okay? Now, when insulin is released, not all cells are going to respond to insulin. And the ones that don't respond because they don't have what? They don't have a receptor for insulin. Okay? The ones that do respond may not respond the same way. So I'm going to give you a question. What do you think a muscle cell does when it encounters insulin? So it has glucose. It encounters insulin. What does it do with the glucose? It can actually convert it into something. What does it do? This is the G. What's the storage form of glucose? Glycogen. Okay? What does a fat cell convert glucose into? What does a fat cell convert glucose into? It's a fat cell, so. And a fat cell is called an adipocyte, or adipose. So a cell from adipose tissue, adipocyte, would be a fat cell. What do you think a fat cell, in response to insulin, what do you think a fat cell does? Converts glucose into fat. Different responses. Okay? Same message, different response. Okay. This is where I'm going to end up. I'm going to end up here, okay? So what we're going to talk about is the way, because one of the things that is really important in this whole unit is control, regulation. So we talked about negative feedback, right, already? We've talked about it a few times. And one of the things that you'll see in this unit is the role of negative feedback in controlling whatever is trying to control. So in this case, what is trying to be controlled here? What do you think is trying to be regulated? Yeah, I heard it. Calcium. So you can see that you expect a certain range for blood. This is blood calcium. This is the amount of calcium in your blood, right? And if it goes too high, what happens? It gets lowered. If it goes too low, it gets raised. Now, you'll notice a very similar pattern, and we'll talk about this. Okay, we'll talk about this one in more detail next time. You'll notice a very similar pattern when we look at sugar levels. Okay? What do you notice? Same thing. Sugar levels go up. What happens? They get lowered. Sugar levels go down too much. They get raised. Classic negative feedback. Okay? Now, because the whole point is most often, what do we want is we want to maintain what? Balance. Okay? What's the problem with not enough calcium? What do you think the problem is? Okay, before we wrap this up, what do you think the most important role of calcium is? Family Feud survey says everyone's going to give me that. Every time I've asked that question, everyone's giving me that answer. It's to build bones. Because you've been taught that since you were embryos, right? Drink your milk to build bones. Well, if that was the case, okay, I'm gonna show you another slide. If that was the case, okay, let me show you a different slide that has to do with calcium levels. Okay, I want you to look at this. This is what happens when you don't have enough calcium in your blood. Take a look at this on the left side here. What does that say? Not enough, so decrease so we don't have enough calcium in the blood. what's happening on this left side? Calcium is coming from what? From the bone. Now, let me think about that for a second. If the most important thing for calcium was to build bone, why would you release it from the bone? Because guess what? It ain't the most important thing. And we'll talk about that. You'll see over the next little while, calcium has an important role in biochemistry. In, not biochemistry, in molecular biology. Okay? It has an important role in cell communication. Okay? And you're going to see some examples of that as we move forward. Okay? So let's stop there. We've introduced the endocrine system. We talked a little bit about hormones. We talked a little bit about feedback. And then we'll continue tomorrow. Okay? That's it, ladies.